open your heart, they don't know what that means.
Yeah,
because
that's a great point.
Everybody is listening to their heart right now and doing what they think feels best for them.
That's Renzo and Monica Ortega, parents of 5 children, authors, and founders of the hit podcast To Become Family. In this episode, you'll hear facts you might not know about Gen Z.
So, question for you, what percentage of Gen Zers do you think are using YouTube?
The most effective way to connect and share the faith.
But I think the way in for the gospel with a lot of, and this is particularly with the young men that I've been able to walk with who are in Gen Z, has been through.
And the topic Gen Z wants to hear about most.
The most common topic,
the most listened to topic. If we really talk about this topic, we know we're getting at least 1,000 clicks right away. Is
all that and more, so stay tuned. I actually wanted to talk to you guys about Banter for the first part because I go back and forth on whether YouTube likes Banter. I think in the podcast world, you know, people kind of enjoy, there's like the Poco a Poco feel where they all kind of make fun of each other for 10 minutes.
Skip it, but like,
but
there's a get to know
it's
them.
there. And some people love the banter and some people just skip past it. But one of the things I actually love about your guys' podcast, which is To Become Family, for anyone who wants to look that up, plug that later, is that just watching you guys, you have such an authentic relationship and joy. And to see you guys like just laugh with each other is so wholesome and fun. And sometimes I wish we did more of that. So what are your thoughts on Banter? Yeah.
I feel like our show is banter and theological discussion mixed in, so you don't know when to fast forward and when not to, because I might
got you hooked. Yeah. We might ramble, or we might have something really
not
good
by
to
design
say.
though. I just feel like that's how our house is.
Yeah.
So it just exudes through us.
Yeah.
I like banter.
I
guess it
hate
depends.
banter.
See, there you go.
So,
Yeah.
well, I like bantering with you, but I hate banter when I listen and watch videos. So it's funny because he's like, no, people love banter. I'm like, but I'm a podcast phony. I don't listen to like anything unless someone's like, listen to this specific episode at 20 minutes. They say something really good. And I'm like, you got it. I just don't have the like.
She has no joy in her heart.
That's right.
And that's
all right. If we're being really vulnerable, Katie's
That's
a
actually
YouTube phony. She doesn't really listen or watch YouTube at all.
Zero. Drew will ask me like, do you think this is like clickable? And I'm like, I wouldn't click on anything. So I don't know that you would, like, you should ask me. Like, I'm
Solidarity.
not the person.
Complementarity in marriage happening before your eyes.
There you go. Yes. That's right. That's right. Yep.
But yeah, on our podcast though, with a conversation, it's really our goal. Anytime somebody says, oh, your podcast started a great conversation between me and my spouse or fiance, we're like, that's it. That's why we wanted it. So like, we don't have all the answers, but we love to help spark conversations for couples, because maybe you've been avoiding this conversation. Maybe you didn't know how to talk about it in the first place. Maybe you didn't know you should talk about it. So that's our goal.
And the amount of fights we had, and we would argue so much while recording. Good thing I could edit. But in the beginning, we used to argue because we would both start teaching and we'd be like, we got to stop teaching. And then it'd be like, no, but they need to learn this point. And like, no, we got to stop. And I would defer to too much banter. Like I would want banter the whole time. And Monica would be like, no, like you got to give them something. Okay. So we found a good balance eventually, but I think it helps people connect so that they see that we're real people and not, because I think, especially when you're on any type of content creation train, people think that you have all the answers. And I would hate that kind of pressure. Because if they spent a day in our house, they would know like there's no answers here. There is mess. The walls are sticky. Like there's
I think that was exactly Drew's point of like, you get a look into a real relationship versus sometimes I think the YouTube algorithm and like ranking for search terms, you're like trying to answer a question very precisely and like you are just teaching and it's like, okay, but did you get to actually know us in that or you just got like a direct, in some ways scripted answer? And so he was like, I just really like how that's a view into the dynamics of a real relationship, which we can lack in the social media comparison Assuming everyone has the perfect answer when their walls are sticky.
Yeah, I also relate to that in the sticky walls. I literally had to wipe sticky blueberry off of my wall today.
Yep.
That's what actually happened. So
Yes.
Yes,
Any fruits?
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a fruitarian
Yes.
who's
Yeah.
3.
Yep.
I asked one of our kids because he was wiping on the walls, and I was like, "Can you not, please?" And he's like, "I'll wipe it on my," and he just wiped it on his shirt. That was a white shirt. Why did you do that?
Like, do you think your shirt's a napkin? That's also my
Yes.
other question. Like, wait, there's a napkin sitting here. You chose to wipe your face like with your shirt. You pull it up. Wait, what?
It's so much closer than the napkin.
So much closer. So much closer.
Save it for later.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Speaking of other banter, I feel like we should address the elephant in the room, which is my sweet ear that I've got going on here. Katie asked before if there's a way I could cover it up with like a beanie or a hoodie. And I thought,
grow his hair magically.
I thought, no, this is actually like maybe viewers will they can't stop staring at it like roadkill. And our retention rate will be phenomenal. For all of our listeners, I had skin cancer 2 years ago. That's where this scar comes from. And so every 3 months, I call it the scourging at the dermatologist. I go in and they just start cutting stuff off me. And this time it was my ear. And for what it's worth, I told Katie, every time, so they biopsy stuff. So they cut it off and then they go test it and then they give you a call back. And so I got the results and Katie was like, well, do you have cancer again? I was like, no, actually. But they are going to have to cut off my ear because they found something that was severely abnormal and they're worried about it. And without missing a beat, Katie goes, well, that's okay. Your ears don't work that well anyways. So
that's love.
Thanks, honey.
Thanks. Yeah, that's all I got. It's valid. We're deaf over
I didn't pick you for your ears, so
that's right.
No.
Thank God. Okay. Oh, banter. I do like the idea of just sprinkling in the banter so people have to listen to it if they want to get any type of value out of this show. I think that's brilliant. That's what I'm going to take away from this. All right. Speaking of value, so you guys, one of the things that I really wanted to have you guys on the show to talk about was Gen Zers. You guys run a high school youth group, so you have a lot of touch points with Gen Zers there. And then also it seems like your podcast is really geared towards kind of this young adult, engaged, young married couple. I think very similar to our viewers in the sense of that we didn't grow up Catholic. And so we don't really know what having an authentic Catholic marriage and family looks like. And a lot of time we're just making it up as we go. And I think our viewers can relate to that. And I think that one of the things I think about in this podcast is kind of talking about like why are we equipped to be able to talk about these things, because we're not the experts in this. But I think hopefully what we bring is that it feels like our viewers are along the journey with us. Like we are just, figuring it out as we go, and we're just kind of passing tips that we've learned to them. And so that a lot of times when we make these videos, that's kind of what I pray that happens. But so Gen Z, you guys have some statistics on Gen Z. And since you guys are the experts in the Gen Z, we're going to have you guys quiz us and see if we can guess how well we know Gen Z.
Oh
yeah.
Well,
this will be interesting because the statistics that I got are specifically about Gen Z and their use of social media. So like talking about the algorithm and all that. So I think it's interesting.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so like we started the show because we wanted to reach our older youth group teens who are now I think they'd be on the older Gen Z.
Yeah.
They're old Gen Zers. And so like I think 25, 26. And we wanted to reach them and be able to continue to walk with them, past high school and college and everything. But they're living all over the country. So we're like, oh, what if we recorded shows and then sent things to them? So like things we think they should know. And that's kind of where it started. And now it's where it is now. But they still listen and they give us feedback and like, oh, thank you for saying this and that. But in terms of the different mediums for the show, we are not great on YouTube yet. But so question for you, what percentage of Gen Zers do you think are using YouTube? Or on YouTube? What percentage?
Man.
Again, this is from a study that did 1,500 people, but in that sample size, what's the?
Oh, I hope it's more than I think it is, because that's the audience we're trying to reach. I would say 60%.
Okay.
I'll go with
$1, Bob.
70%.
It's in 2022, it was 96%. In 2023, is 93% are on YouTube.
Wow.
Wow.
Daily.
Daily.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Good.
Good.
We're back.
That makes me want to do more YouTube, I guess.
Actually, no. Well, you know what's fascinating is that I have a really good friend who's in my men's group that I lead, and he does like digital marketing stuff. And we were talking the other day. He's like, yeah, YouTube is the biggest search engine in the world. I was like, that's not true. I was like, Google is the first. He goes, not anymore. I was like, dang. So Google is the biggest, or sorry, YouTube is the biggest search engine. It overtook just Googling things.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
You just YouTube things.
Just YouTube things now.
Yeah. Right. Because if you want to learn how to do anything, like that's
is Google going to become the Ask Jeeves?
No.
I still read.
Ask Jeeves.
Maybe it's like,
is Ask Jeeves still a thing? Can we look that up?
I
might cut this. I might split screen this into me just looking on Ask Jeeves for 5 minutes. God, that would be fun. Wow.
All right. So the other social media though that I think is super interesting. So what percentage do you think are using TikTok?
Oh my goodness, 110%. Right. I don't know, a lot.
I'm gonna go with 90.
Okay.
If you went with 110, maybe they're below YouTube.
Yeah. So
96 was daily YouTube.
So in 2023, it was 63%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
I'd be really fascinated to see where we are in 2024. That actually also gives me some hope, because I don't feel like you can get a full argument or like even grasp a concept in 1 minute.
No way.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. I don't think they went this deep into the data, but like, is YouTube that high because they also do shorts, and like there's also super short content, and like they have the different levels of content. Like if you want longer, you can have it. If you want shorter, I'd be interested, because I think that they did a good job to position themselves in a place where like Gen Z wants to consume.
Yeah.
But I will say anecdotally for TikTok in particular, and then even Instagram in 2020 during the shutdowns, when we were still trying to do youth group like virtually, which is anyways, that's a separate episode. But the election happened during that time, right? So here we have the kids who aren't in school, or they're like part-time in school and socially distanced and all this stuff, and then we're meeting virtually for youth group, and they were getting all of their political content from TikTok.
Yeah.
And so these 16, 17, 18-year-olds were making political voting decisions or political stances. Not all of them were voting at the time, based on what they were seeing on TikTok. And we had almost like a mass exodus from youth group, from one group of kids who had found certain topics, and, you know, the church says certain things about these certain things, and they were like, we're leaving. And we're like, hi, we can't even talk to you. Like, we can't even have a full conversation with you, because here we are.
But even the full conversation aside, at that point, so this is 4 years ago, there weren't Catholic channels. There weren't as many Catholic channels creating the short form content that you could kind of have a rebuttal and like, hey, check this out instead. Whereas like, I think there's more now. I still think that in terms of the Catholic world, we're still fairly behind. So like, thank you Catholic Link and you guys for doing this. Like, right. Like there's not a lot. And because like 90 something percent are on YouTube, like that's where they're getting their content. Like that's where they're learning. They're being catechized by YouTube.
Yeah. I'd be fascinated to see timelines, like, because I think TikTok is created in a way that it is more addictive, and you just kind of get sucked in and stuck there. Although YouTube has longer content, I would be curious on the amount of time usage of the platforms, because for the 63% that are on TikTok, are they crushing TikTok? Versus, you know, I'm on YouTube, I listen to my 3 favorite channels, and they provide me an hour of content each, or you know, like it together, but it's different in its usage.
Yeah. According to this study, 1 in 5 of this generation, 1 in 5 of the teens said that they're on TikTok or YouTube constantly. So like they did it for,
Okay.
how often are you on this? They said they're constantly on it. So
Okay.
Yeah.
it's like so some people are just like they're slamming shorts and reels and everything.
Yeah. That's fair. I don't know. This could dissuade any of our Gen Zers that are listening now. I refuse to be on TikTok.
It's true.
I won't do it. Yep. Oh man. Yeah, this is like a curmudgeon-y.
We're at that age though. I've said that. I am such a curmudgeon now. People share them. Like, I don't want to know anything about this.
By the way, we are all in our mid-30s. We are all solid millennials. Sorry, we're trying to relate and understand. But on the other aspect, Drew's is also from a.
I mean, being a fighter pilot in the Air Force, there's also like massive security concerns coming with a platform that is run by the People's Republic of China that censors things. Like, it's just
Catholic Link wanted us to launch their TikTok, and we were like,
I said no.
And at the time, Drew was still active duty, and we were like, we cannot be on our faces. Sorry, like that is not an option. And to this day, they're not going to be on our phones right now. But that's where we're at from a totally different than even the general.
YouTube is better. That's what I have to say.
YouTube.
Yes, that's where they are. YouTube. The stats say that's where they are. So it makes
there you go. I like it.
So, in terms of Facebook, which I think is funny, what percentage of them do you think are using?
Oh my gosh!
So what percentage are using Facebook, and also out of that percentage, how many of them are using it constantly?
Oh man.
So what percentage do you think are using Facebook?
20% are using Facebook, and 5% are using it constantly.
I guess what is using it? Because I bet a decent amount of them have a Facebook account. But I would say, so I'm gonna say, so I'm gonna say like 70%. I guess it depends on how you define it. I would say 70% have a Facebook account
that it automatically posts on from their Instagram. And
but I would say 15% actually use it constantly.
So it's 33% are use the platform, and 3% are on it constantly.
Okay, I was a little closer.
Yeah, I feel very blessed that we are millennials, and again, this is such a curmudgeon thing, such an old person thing, like back in my day. But
I love it.
But we were in high school, I think, early college, when like social media started becoming a thing, right? Besides MySpace, but that's who's that?
Or AOL.
But like that we got to grow up. We got to have a childhood without social media and without the devices, and we got to like kind of wade ourselves slowly into it in our late teens, early 20s. And I think that's helped us with how to navigate it with our kids, because like we could be like, we know our kids don't need it, whereas I think the parents that are raising the Gen Zers, all the kids have it, so they feel like if I don't let my kid have it, they're the only one. Like they're going to be so isolated. Whereas with our group of friends and all of their kids, like even like secular, more secular kids, like in their soccer teams and other teams, like they don't have phones either. Like more parents are going towards like you don't really need a device. So I feel very blessed that we got to avoid that, because I think there's a lot of detrimental parts of it, of having constantly screens and information at your fingertips all the time.
Yeah. And you're saying being accessible all the time has been damaging too, to like somebody always knows how to reach you all the time. And then so you feel like you need to respond immediately. I know I have that just from my like type A personality. I don't like to have red bubbles on my phone. And Renzo's like, just don't answer. And I'm like, no, I have to. And it's like, that's the addictive part of your phone, and it can play to your personality, I think. And
there are times when I get a message, and if I see it, I will like very specifically not answer it right then and just wait, just to prove to myself that like I'm not accessible 24/7. No, Renzo, I think you bring up a really good point of I think I pray, or I hope that we are in a unique position to be able to talk about this stuff, because a lot of us grew up without it, or it was part of a small part of our childhood, right? Like I remember I have a lot of memories of friends coming over in the winter, and we'd go out and play ice hockey for like 8 hours, and then we would come back, and then we'd play Nintendo 64 or what, so it was kind of like it was one of the things that we did, versus like that's all that we have. And so I think that we in some ways we knew a little bit of what it was like before I mean, we knew what it was like before the smartphone, but before the technology came in. And then we kind of got it shoved down our throats and we just ate trash for years. And
Yeah.
now we're looking at it and we're like, that's really not good. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think I want my kids to have the same access that I did when I was, out in college, out of college and that stuff. And I
Mm.
don't know. I just think that we're in a position to kind of speak about it, hopefully from a place of prayer and wisdom of where like, no, we've seen what this is like, and not all of this is good. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think too what you were saying with our experience in youth ministry is like we've been able to like watch that manifest in these younger age groups and into Gen Z, and how um just how it has like affected their socialization. And so like I definitely don't want this to be like critical, but it's they communicate and they socialize differently. So even like the way that we try to share the gospel and evangelize has to be somewhat adaptive to it, but then also like, but the Lord wants real authentic relationship with you. So like, let's also not share that with you as well, right? And
Mhm.
like bring you to that because it's so good for you. Like that's the way you were made. You were made for that relationship. You were made for community, and that's like a lot of what their heart desires, but they think that they're able to get that filled somewhere else. So
Yeah, because I think the tendency is to think that because they grew up with all these devices and constantly being entertained and having like the constant dopamine rush, that in order for them to reach a position where they could really encounter the Lord, like they need to have that. And we found that the kids that are able to come and able to sit in adoration for the first time, they are blown away because they're like, wait, what is this?
mhm.
That we've
Huh.
never experienced this before. There's the music. It's the same as when you've seen it before.
Yeah.
And there's music and there's silence and there's just hit with like, this is, I don't get this time. Like I've never gotten this silence. I never gotten this time to just think. And then I'm praying to God, and I've never had this type of experience. Not all of them come out of it changed, but they definitely come out intrigued because like, this is something I don't have. And it's
Mhm.
and just exposing them to that, and then just over time they start returning to it because they realize, again, this in this pew is the only time I'm getting this. Like everywhere else I go, I'm constantly connected to something. And those things that I'm connected to don't feed me, they drain me. And like, this is the only place where I get to come to something that's feeding me. And then again, they can't articulate it, they don't understand why, but like even just showing them that there is something different in the tabernacle, something different on the altar, I think is powerful. It's definitely harder to get them in the pews than it used to be, right? Like as much as you like the fun games and the all the things that we used to do to get them in, like it's not as enticing because like again, the phones have more entertainment value. But once you get them in there, once you get a few friends, they're like, hey, you should check this out. It changes things. Like they do get to encounter the Lord, and they're more enticed by silence now than they are by anything else.
That's such a fascinating and good point, that we crave something that's different because what we're currently doing is not working. And there is a part of our heart that realizes that and then looks for what is it that needs to change. My morning devotional was all about the power of solitude this morning, and just this idea of sometimes it's uncomfortable to go into solitude because all the thoughts start rushing at us and we hear all these voices that we like quiet away with our distractions. But as we enter into that and really learn and let the Holy Spirit guide us to what is the truth being revealed in that solitude, like how important solitude is for our souls, for us, for that growth, for that intimacy of relationship. I think we used to have a prayer metaphor that it was like, well, why do I have to tell God things? Like, he already knows it. And it's like, well, because that's the difference between scrolling through somebody's Instagram and seeing their highlights and like to actually talking to them of the depth of it. Like, yes, he knows about it, but he wants to know you. And that there's a depth and intimacy of going into that solitude, of going into that quiet and having a true relationship when you are married and you live with the person and you're talking to them is very different than a relationship where we haven't caught up in a couple of years, guys. Like, there's a difference in our relationship right now, even our friendship, even though I've seen things on Instagram or in your podcast or all the places. There's a difference when we get to sit down and actually talk to you guys, like just this right now.
Yeah, I'm definitely convinced God doesn't want to be a stalker.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Does not want to be an Instagram stalker or a Facebook stalker. If you're a little older.
Yeah, Monica and Renzo, what would you guys say? Because maybe someone watching this is interested in trying to reach Gen Z more. They're trying to understand Gen Z a little bit more. And I think what you guys said was really profound. So maybe we'll kind of pull on this thread and see what unravels of doing things like adoration is something that they cannot get in the world. And one of the things, I think one of the most, one of the biggest opportunities that the church has right now to be able to reach Gen Z is to offer them something that the world can't offer. Because, like, let's face it, like this Catholic YouTube channel is never going to be as big as Mr. Beast, right? Like, competing with the world in worldly things is never going to. I'm never going to outdo it, right? But if I can use this tool to be able to draw people out, to be able to draw people into prayer, like, spoiler alert, the point of this this YouTube channel is to like bring you into relationship with God, because that is real. That is something that you can't get on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram. So all that being said, what would you guys say to someone who is trying to kind of use these tools to reach Gen Z, but also, not get stuck in the muck that is social media?
I'm a huge advocate of a daily prayer life, and that they have to start there. Because I know, like, all of us, especially like all of us who want to create, we're kind of digital missionaries. Like, we understand our goal is to draw people closer to Christ, but it's so easy, and this is kind of in any type of mission work. Like, it's so easy to get lost in like how terrible the situation seems out there, and you kind of forget that like it's not of your power. You're not drawing anybody in. It's all grace. It's God's the one, that's going to be pulling people or drawing people closer. And we have the temptation is to kind of forget that and to not rely on Him all the time. And I know we have that too, of like, we get together and we're like, oh, let's just record and let's put whatever out there. But what's nice is that we've gotten into the habit of praying before. And every time we pray, we do ask God, like, if this is not your will, please destroy it. Like, we don't want to do anything that you don't want us to do. And it also reminds us to pray together and to pray on our own, and to make sure that that's our first goal, is to make sure that we're pursuing holiness and pursuing Him. And then from there, letting our work kind of flow from there. So, I think the biggest thing that Gen Z wants is authenticity, because everything out that they're consuming, especially you're seeing this in trends too, that they're consuming a lot of like curated content that they look perfect, they got everything together, the edits and the cuts are great, but they're starting to kind of start consuming content that looks more of like 2007, 2008 vlogging, more like, what is your world like? What is your life like? Are you people? And people, they're starting to like that more. So I think any Catholic person who's creating content, if they could just show who they actually are, I think that's going to make a huge difference. Because I think starting there and be like, you're normal, you're into all this Catholic stuff, but you're normal. This is different. What else do you have? And then from there, leading them to Jesus, and in whatever small way we think we can do that.
Yeah. And I think, like, whether or not you're on social media or a youth minister, or like whether or not you have like a formal role versus just like you're just living your life. I think one of the things that we're also noticing too in the way that we like express ourselves with them is phrases like open your heart, listen to like, they don't know what that means.
Yeah,
because
that's a great point.
everybody is listening to their heart right now and doing what they think is like feels best for them, right? So they're like, that's not different than what everybody else is saying. So while that's not true, and like for us as millennials, that was like one of the conversion lines, right? like before adoration, the youth minister was like, open your heart and just lay down your life to Jesus. And you're like, yes, like prostrate, right? That's not a language that is separating you, the church from the secular world anymore. And they really grab onto like being blunt and like honest. Like their BS meters are still on point. And then when you're like this is Jesus in the Eucharist. They're like, no one has told me that before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
we get a lot of that.
When you go to confession, your sins are forgiven. Wait, what? I thought I was just supposed to like feel bad about telling the priest what I did. Like they have internalized these catechesis from when they're young and not been reminded of that as like they're getting older. And so I think that there's just also like, yeah, I'm going to go to mass because the mass is different, you know, and like, and just telling them like, yeah, come to mass with me. And they are at least the ones that like come and are willing to try something. They're like, oh
yeah. When they buy in, they buy in hard. Like they become daily mass goers.
Yeah.
They start really pursuing.
And I think like, yeah, that's where, you know, and just like a lot of the teachings of the church, obviously you have to teach from love, but like a lot of it is they haven't heard it or they've heard it wrong from a social media post that was like kind of distorting the way that it actually is. And so by you living, like Renzo said, by you living from an authentic relationship with Christ and you living your life, you become a trustworthy person for them. And then when you say something that catches them, they're like, oh, and they want to know more after that. So I think also too, like not leading with the stuff that worked for us. Because we came from parents that were like, don't cry when you lose a sports game. So you're just like walls up, right? So when somebody's like, let Jesus in, you're like, that's what I needed to hear, right? They don't need to hear that. Like that's, so I think it's just different. We just have to lead with something different than what we were led with.
That makes so much sense because the reality of, listen to your heart, like do what feels good, those sound the same. And that wasn't the message that was being pushed in our conversions. However, the words, the change of the vernacular language, the change of how we speak, the amount of words that my teens and co-op use that I'm like, I don't know those words. But like the reality that language changes, but also upbringings change. And we've talked a little bit about like these kids have never experienced a childhood where their parents haven't had a smartphone. There isn't all of this technology, that there is a significant difference in just some of their upbringing styles, the parenting styles that I feel like are very popular or more common now are definitely a more gentle, affirming, let you cry parenting than perhaps can be generalized to the millennials. I find the authenticity and how we live that out. It was interesting. So I was sitting with John chapter 1 last night, and it's the call of, specifically the very end, the call of Philip and then Nathaniel. And Nathaniel, Jesus looks at and says, there is no duplicity in him. There is no deceit in him. And it was interesting because I related in my conversion more to Philip's call of like, Jesus came and found him and like came and brought him out. Okay, I can totally relate to that because there was some duplicity in my life when I entered into my conversion. I could not say that that was not the case. But the need in a follower of Christ to be blunt, to say nothing good comes out of Nazareth, like to just bluntly say the truth in the worldview that they had and be able to go to the roots there, and how quickly he is able to receive Christ as the Son of God. To receive, like how quickly that transition happens when he doesn't want the duplicity. And so I think from the beginning, the Gospels would tell us that authenticity matters. And it's hard to get authenticity when you are seeing my 1 hour of content versus my day-to-day life of the chaos that occurs. But
well, I think just going back to what you guys said about the authenticity, in the sense of, one of the things that I think will become really important, in the next couple of years, is having people who are, that you can trust, these names, where, because sometimes it's so hard to make sense of what is going on. I mean, you could find a study for, like, you're like, oh, I wonder if this is the thing, and you find a study that says one thing, and then another study that says the exact
I
opposite, and
think
you're like,
about
I don't know what
diet
to trust.
and
Yeah,
health.
oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
This is
what
not
is
healthy.
healthy?
This is
Yeah, good luck. Um, and so you've got that piece. You've also got AI, right, which
Yeah.
is constantly churning out. So I think what's going to happen is, there's going to be so much information out there, and what I think a lot of this generation is going to look for is, they're going to see, what I've been doing is not making me happy.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be more out there. And that, I think, is the church's in, to say, hey, we can offer you something the world can't offer you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and by the way, here are people who are living it. Here are people who are joyful, who have
Mm-hmm.
an amazing marriage, who love their children, who are on fire for the faith. And so I don't know. I'm like really convicted that that's the church's in,
Mm-hmm.
to this community, is living authentically joyful lives, and just presenting this alternative, to where people, they go, I can't make sense of any of this. I don't know which way is left or right. And you're like, well, here's the way to Jesus. Like, what do
Mm-hmm.
you got to lose? Give it a try. I don't know.
Right.
Does any of that make sense? Any thoughts
I
on that?
Yeah, because
Absolutely.
I believe very strongly that at some point, and I don't think it's that far off in the future. Those of us that are faithful, that are living out our faith, and have built communities that are really supporting us in our faith, are going to be tasked to really go out and go out from our place of growth, and really start drawing people back in, because especially Gen Z now, a lot of them have no catechesis whatsoever, and if they did, it's fairly small, to the point that, like, they don't know who Jesus is, and not even like, oh, like, they don't know that he's Son of God. Like, they may not even know that he's a character beyond, like, they may think he's a character in a fairy tale, but outside of that, like, they don't know that he has any significance. Like, I've run into, and we've interacted with these teens who, like, Christianity and Jesus, like, it's the same. They don't know they're related. Like, the level of, and not in a mean way, like they just are ignorant to it, and, like, they've just never heard the gospel at all. So at some point in the near future, like, we're going to be preaching the gospel as though it was the first time they've ever heard it. And I think there's something powerful there, because we could assume that, oh, because Gen Z's never, because of all the information that's out there, they're so far gone. But I think it's actually the opposite. Like, they're going to be primed for, when they're hitting their 20s, like, they're going to be primed for that. You're not happy with these things anymore. Here's Christ. This is different. And this is something you should pursue. And I think, when, like, all of us, like, when we had our conversions, and I had mine when I was 17. And I think because I was older, and I wasn't a younger high schooler, I think it was easier to, like, really be convicted. So I wonder if they're getting their, very first encounter with Christ in college, I wonder if they're going to be even more convicted to, like, I'm living it this way, and, like, I'm committed. So I think that there's going to be a time where we have to really go out there and start living it more publicly, so that people can see, like, there's something different here.
And I think also, in addition to being ready to go out, I think we need to really be more ready to open our homes to these people, to allow those that are interested to, like, come in and be received as well. Because we can, like, again, it's kind of like social media, like, oh, they look so great at mass, look at how cute they all walk in, and they genuflect, and all the babies, like, sit, and they do their little thing, and they think kids are so sweet until they're screaming. And then, but that's almost still like an Instagram clip, right? Like, that's almost still a snippet of our life. And then to meet somebody and to, like, yeah, come on over for dinner. Like, oh, you know what? The day's kind of crazy because I'm homeschooling, and I have to get lunches ready or whatever, but, like, you're welcome to come, I'll talk to you in between the math lessons, whatever. And to allow them to come in and to see real life. Again, that's what's different, right? Adoration and Christ present and silence is different, as is, like, real life, instead of being on my phone, instead of being on social media. And I think that there's
Real life with a lot of kids.
real life with a lot of kids, right? And that, like, we're not a lot of kids, just like newlyweds, just have your engaged couple friends over and like
Mm-hmm.
talk about newlywed life. Like I think that these real live authentic conversations are going to also change a lot of hearts, because you're like, I didn't know that's what it was like. I didn't see that. And yeah, I think that's really important too.
Yeah, oh man.
Oh, you inspire me to do different things, but go.
I think that that's really beautiful. Right now, I'm reading a book called "From Christendom to Apostolic Mission" by Monsignor
Great book.
Shea. Yeah,
Great.
and I heard Monsignor Shea talk, and he basically gave a talk about this, and it was so convicting.
Mhm.
This idea, and I think one of the beautiful things about the book is that it just puts words to how you're feeling,
Mhm.
right? And those are things when you read and you're like, yes. And what
people understand me.
yeah.
Somebody,
I think
praise.
just kind of the premise of the book is that we are no longer in an age of Christendom. So there was the apostolic age, and then like Christianity became cool, and there were these, Christendom era where if you just grew up, you would go to church and you would hear the gospel, and your family was Catholic and everyone you knew was Catholic, and that's just the way it is. And like we are no longer in
Mhm.
an age of Christendom. We are back in the apostolic age. And I guess one thing that just stood out to me that you were saying about preaching the gospel in just to go back to the basics, because they haven't heard it, or maybe they have, maybe Gen Z in general has heard it, but they've heard such a watered down or such a warped version of it that they need to just you need to like reestablish the building blocks, the basics
Mhm.
of that truth before you can build on it. So I don't know, any thoughts on just kind of just preaching the gospel
In
in
yeah.
this age.
Yeah, and I think because I love that book, by the way, so I highly recommend people read that. And I like the statistics part. I don't know how far you are in it, but we talked about like how spoiler. Well, this is like general knowledge, like that the apostles at that point had like only 12 people, and then like statistically, it looked like there's no chance this religion was going to survive, and just like with the small number. So like even though we can feel like there's less believers around us, less people who are faithful, like regardless of our numbers, like we are in a good place because God and His grace and Christ has won the victory already. So like we're in a good place. That's I like that book because of that. But I think the way in for the gospel with a lot of, and this is particularly with the young men that I've been able to walk with who are in Gen Z, has been through human virtue, and then from there, then getting them to perfected virtue. Like they human virtues is, again, that's super rare to them, and they don't understand like I want to be this guy, I'm not, how do I get there? And just being able to, one, within my own life, live a virtuous life so that I'm not just saying things without living it myself. And then once they get to a certain part where they're like, yeah, but I still struggle, I'm like, all right, yeah, because you need Jesus. Like there's like, but now we got you hooked, because I know one of our ex youth group kids who now became Catholic this past Triduum, he came to our youth group as a senior. He was an atheist, like, or agnostic at least, like didn't believe anything, didn't know anything, and he started joining because I had started an Exodus 90 group with the seniors. So I was like, we're gonna do Exodus 90 together, and he joined just because of Exodus 90. He's like, this seems really hard to do. I want to do it. And then from there, he came to our retreat, started coming to our youth group. He came to Steubenville with us, went through this whole thing and asked a ton of questions. But it all started because the human virtue aspect of, the human excellence aspect intrigued him enough that it drew him in. And then from there, and now he's super devout.
He started leading. He was one of the like voted board members of his Newman Club before being confirmed,
Catholic.
like before being baptized.
Because he was going to daily mass, he was leading all the prayer groups that they had, and they're like, oh, he's so committed, and he wasn't even Catholic yet. So like, he knew not to, he knew so much not to receive, but he still went to mass every day. Like it's just it blew my mind that happened, and his whole story. But it started with human virtue, and then hearing the gospel from there. Because I think a lot of the Gen Z young men are very hungry for that.
Yes, we need to make virtue cool again.
I feel like
what's the Gen Z word for cool? I don't know. Someone posted it below. Probably not. It's probably not cool.
The reality of, I feel like that's why I'm even married to my husband. Like the human virtue that Drew possessed and showed in college was so radically different than anything I had seen. And so a little bit of Drew and my story, he was my confirmation sponsor more than a year before we actually started dating. And so he was already inspiring me from a virtue and faith standpoint of something that could be different, that was, just totally different than anything I had ever seen or any guy that I had ever, dated. And it just was this, and that was attractive. And it was cool in a different way than I had defined that word previously. And so, yes, there was,
Men, if you want a super awesome spouse, be virtuous.
Absolutely. I'll affirm that. Yes. Because there's something that's like, there's something attractive, but then also so reassuring of a man who says that he wants to be this way and actually works to be that way. Right. And they're not perfect and they're going to make mistakes, but like, you know that they're authentically like trying. Right. And you can see that they want their good and they want your good.
One of the things that I love about your guys' podcast is how real you are and how it seems like no topic is off limits in a sense, which I really, I don't know. I give you guys so much credit for to be able to talk about the real stuff in relationships. What would you say what feedback have you gotten from your podcast from Gen Zers? And is there any topic or thing that they seem to really gravitate towards?
Go ahead.
No,
that was a piqued interest
well,
face.
well, first, I know a topic, but first, in terms of like the feedback, I think you get most of it because they send messages through Instagram.
Yeah. So I'm kind of more the one that's like on our social media pages and stuff. So I think a lot of our favorite feedback is to hear that this started a good conversation between them and their boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, spouse. Because it was presented in a new way, or they hadn't heard that before, or they were like, ooh, that was a topic we've kind of been tiptoeing around. And now you kind of gave us new language to talk about it. So it doesn't feel so scary, intimidating. So we love that because like if couples aren't communicating about these things, whether it seems small or big, like there's going to be an effect in their relationship about it. And it's scary and it's damaging to be like avoiding certain things, especially when you know you're avoiding a certain thing and you're like, oh no, we can't talk about that. It always ends in a fight. And it's like, okay, so maybe this is a different way to go about it. Or maybe, let's use a common language. So we're talking about the exact same thing. But like, just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean that thing isn't going away. So I think that that's really important. And I'm grateful that this is a vehicle for couples to start having those conversations. And I think for some is, what we had talked about before is just like living authentically of like, this is kind of how we've navigated maybe this thing that you've learned about in catechism, but like didn't know how to apply that to like an actual life together. And also like, we're two very different people. So how does this relate? So that's been nice to hear too, of just like, I just didn't know how to like navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be navigated the same way that we're doing it, but to see that, it's a little bit messy and it doesn't go perfectly and it's a little awkward sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah. Like for example, for marriage, I know that I'm supposed to die to myself, right? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. So I'm supposed to die. And I know that and I can apply that broadly, but that's also difficult to apply into like how I communicate with you without knowing like there's different ways of communication. There's different ways that you understand things that I'm saying and that you receive information and that you process information. Like there's so much nuance to how and uniqueness to each individual human. So like to know how your spouse works and how you work is not an easy thing. So I think in terms of our podcast, we try to like just show how we've navigated that. Because again, while holding up the truths of the Catholic Church, but also showing that like it's not easily applicable. There's a lot of like bumps in the road. These are the bumps that we've hit. These are the bumps we're still hitting. And hopefully people can hear that and then they can then start their own conversation with one another. Because again, they're not going to work the same way we do. But they'll be able to get to know each other better, hopefully through the conversation they're having, and then ultimately realize that like everything has to come and go through Christ. Like it can't be something that we do by our own power.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned it before, and it's a similar situation for us. But the way like marriage was modeled, and also in particular Christian marriage was modeled, was not really modeled in our homes growing up. So we didn't see this firsthand. And so we believe certain things and we're like, yeah, we want that, but how? And that's the, that's hopefully our decades worth of marriage is what we're just trying to show is like, it took us years to kind of figure out how some of that stuff, and we'd rather you not need that long to figure some of that stuff out. So here we're willing to share about it. Because like even just healthy conflict resolution wasn't really modeled in our homes. And I don't know, just different things. And again, we're talking about like generational differences, and there's different ways that we correct or maybe overcorrect the shortcomings of the generations before us. And so how can we kind of temper that? And I think that like our church and our faith gives us a lot of balance with that, and gives us a lot of like the ability to have a firm foundation instead of feeling like I need to swing in the complete opposite direction in order to not have history repeat itself. But yeah, and then the most common topic,
the most listened to topic. If we really talk about this topic, we know we're getting at least 1,000 clicks right away. Is sex, like anything sex related, sexual intimacy, like it is such a hot button topic. But again, I think it's because they know that our listeners and whoever comes across the podcast knows that we're approaching it from a very Catholic perspective, but also willing to give practical advice and share stories of our own struggles, because that's one thing we found is that not as many people are willing to be open, because I get it, it's vulnerable, you're really putting it all out there for people to listen to, but it's because we want to have good marriages and good, and to not do what we did. I did awful. I was terrible. But it's such a, sorry. I think it's also my personality. I have such a low bar of caring for certain things. Like I just don't, and I'm like, people judge me differently. It's fine. I'm only 5'6". It's okay. Yeah, I can't get any taller. Like I just think I'm like, I can't control that. But like see, throw the banter where they never know when to fast forward.
There you
go. All right. Oh man, that was so good. Yep. Yes. I will say, Monica and Renzo may or may not be writing a book about sex in this topic, so look out for that. If you guys see that, that'll probably come out in a year or so. I'm just going to throw it down so that it happens. And we need to get to the lightning round.
Yes.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Lightning round question number 1. Who are your favorite saints?
I love Saint John the Beloved, and I love Saint Gianamala.
Mine is Saint John Paul II.
Nice.
Solid. Wait, hold on. I do want to say that for our baby, we have a name picked out, is a boy, and his name is Joesph Rosati Taylor. And I just want to put it out there for the record on YouTube that we picked the name before it was cool. Yes! And we knew that Blessed Pierre Giorgio Rosati was going to become a saint, which is awesome.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. Yes. Rosati middle name.
You do too?
We have a Rosati middle name too. Our Thomas is Rosati.
Excellent. All right. Let it be known, all of us had it before it was cool.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
We were banking on it. That was such a random lightning. Favorite devotional?
Oh, that's a hard one. I feel like that changes with seasons of life.
That's a good point.
And just like what mental space and time and capacity I have. I do say morning offering every morning. One of my best confessions experiences in confession was like a really short, and it probably wouldn't seem life-changing. It was, it was like one of those, like, I'm just going to go in and out really quick because grace works. Like I wasn't going in there like heavy, heavily burdened, but the priest was like, you are a mom of a lot of young children. You say your morning offering every day, and then everything after that is a prayer because you said so. And I was like, okay. And that was like so good for me to hear in that moment, because I felt like everything, all of my mom stuff was holding me back from being spiritual. And he was like, nope, check that. Like, that's not it. So yes. So I start my day with a morning offering.
So good.
I'm a simple man. Rosary. Simple.
What is your favorite book recommendation?
Oh,
he's gonna want categories or genres.
No. You go first.
I'm gonna have to. I'm sorry. All my answers come into doubles. So I love the book Be Healed by Dr. Bob Schuchts. So he's a Catholic psychologist.
That's a good one.
And I think that so many of us compartmentalize our spirituality and our emotional healing. And I think that we are integrated, holistic people. And I think that's important. And then 7 Sacred Pauses. I always mispronounce her name, but by Sister Macrina Berniker. But she wrote basically the Liturgy of the Hours, but for the laity, and how that we can like live those Liturgy of the Hours instead of stopping, praying, opening a book, and like chanting and saying certain, verses and things, but just like what do each of those hours mean, and how as laity we can pause and like live that hour well. So
I've been looking around like, what are the books? I don't remember what I read. There's so many different ones. I think the one that, in terms of ministry, that I love the most is Forming Intentional Disciples by Sherry Waddell. I think that one's had the biggest impact on how I view ministry and how I view mission and going out and trying to, win others for Christ.
Nice. And last, where can people learn more about you and what you guys have going on?
We are on Instagram at To Become Family, TWO. We have a website, tobecomefamily.com. We're sometimes on YouTube when we're not really, really tired and wearing hoodies when we record our podcast.
That's, having to shower before YouTube is.
So we record our podcast typically late at night after bedtime. And so just at that point, there's just no YouTube happening. But our podcast does come out weekly. We're everywhere, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And it's called To Become Family, TWO.
All right. Real quick, Renzo, very fast lightning round question. Yeah. Why should our kids do jujitsu?
Oh my goodness. How much time do you have? I love jujitsu so much. And one of our daughters struggled last year with intense anxiety. And we were going through so many like things to help work her through it. We were at the point where like, maybe we can't do this ourselves. Right. And we put her in jujitsu, and jujitsu became for her the hard thing that she doesn't want to do. I was like, but you can do hard things anyway. I can do hard things anyway. And she cried for so long getting on there. And it's gotten her to the point that she understands that she can be uncomfortable. She can be like not want to be doing it. It can be hard. But the fact that she knows she can do it anyway has given her a tool that now she uses for all other aspects of her life, like literally everything else, because she still has moments of anxiety about things that like just why I don't know why that makes her anxious. But because she does jujitsu and she's been laid on by a 70-pound boy who's just trying to take her head off, and she's been able to get out of it and then take his back and like, and choke him out. Because she's been able to do that, she's like, okay. And I've said to her, like, this is like jujitsu. And she's like, okay. Like, you could do jujitsu. Yes. Take a deep breath and then go. Like, that's given her it's a tool that I wish I had as a kid, knowing that like I could do hard things. And it's not like it's such an interesting thing because like you can't fake doing the hard thing because the other person's trying to strangle you. So like you're doing the hard thing and like you're meeting it, and it's like that. There's nothing else like meeting your monsters like that. Like
there's something wild because like you physically feel the same when you're anxious and when you're being like wrestled.
Like you can't breathe, like because I do it too. So like there's times where, like, there's a guy on me. Sometimes it's your brother, and he's laying on my face, and I can't breathe, and like I have to settle down, settle my brain. Like I can get out of this. I know how to get out of this. And it's such a powerful
what do I do
tool.
next? Like what is one step I should do? And that's been, like the physicality of it and the mental sport of it has been huge for our children. Huge.
That's for the next show.
Yeah.
I like it. All
right.
Oh, okay. We can talk to you guys for a long time.
Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. For our listeners, leave us a comment and let us know what stood out to you. I love hearing from you guys, letting us know that people are actually listening to this.
Hey, and if you totally disagree, if you're a Gen Zer, let us know.
Tell us we're wrong. So for all of our listeners, we just pray this time is your link to living the faith like never before. We are praying for you. Until next time, God bless. If you think marriage and family life is hard, check out this video where we share our secrets to growing in holiness in the everyday life of marriage. We'll see you in the next video.